Good evening, I'm Bernard Green, Chair of the Brookline Select Board, and this is a special meeting, actually, of the Select Board for November 21st, 2024. Let's start off with any announcements or comments from the Select Board. Seeing none, let's move on to public comment. Tiffany, you want to
Yes.
read the rules to our vast audience here?
Thank you for joining us for public comment. This is an opportunity for us to hear your perspective on the issues in Brookline that matter to you. Each person speaking tonight is limited to 3 minutes. You don't need to use the entire time, but you may if you like. Once 15 minutes has been met, there is an opportunity at the conclusion of the Select Board's business for additional comments. Members of the public sometimes raise questions during public comment. We may be able to provide a quick answer to a question, but are more likely to work with staff to get a more thorough answer and respond over email. We'll let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining and when your time is up. Please conclude your remarks at that time. If you have more to say, you are welcome to send an email to board members expressing your thoughts in greater detail. Any person wishing to speak must begin their comment by identifying themselves with their full name and either their Brookline precinct number or street address. We did not have any speakers sign up in advance. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to speak during public comment at this time or online? If so, please raise your hand using the raise the hand feature. It looks like no one is indicating their desire to speak.
Okay, let's move on to our miscellaneous calendar. First item is the minutes for November 12th, 2024. Any corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, I move approval of the minutes of November 12th, 2024. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Jonathan Sawyer. Aye. Mike Sandman. Aye. Paul Warren. Aye. And Chair votes aye. But next, we have two items. Contract with Enterprise Equipment Company for the chiller HVAC system at the senior center and an appropriation transfer in the Select Board's office. So, any questions or comments about those? I move approval of items B and C, or 3B and 3C. All in favor, John Sawyer. Aye. Michael Sandman. Aye. Paul Warren. Aye. And Chair votes aye. Next, our calendar. Abby Dean Scholarship, question of authorizing the Office of Town Council to file a secret complaint in court to modify the Abby Dean Scholarship eligibility conditions to increase possible recipients. Are you gonna present that or?
So this is Susan Harris, Associate Town Council.
Yeah.
This relates to the discussion we had on Tuesday.
Nothing else you want to say?
Any further questions?
Okay. Any questions from the board?
I have one question.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned that it's hard to know exactly what the parameters would be because it's a process. Or come back to us when the parameters are decided.
That can be up to you. We've left the motion as written flexible to give us the different discretion to work with the Attorney General's office on that, but we're happy to come back to you if you'd like to.
Yeah, I think once we figure out what it is, we can get
Do you want more than just notice? I mean, this is really school committee.
no, I think this is good.
And that can be in the form of a memo. Okay, so all in favor of authorizing the street claim, please indicate by saying aye. John Sawyer. Aye. Michael Sandman. Aye. Paul Warren.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next, offer reallocation. Question of approving the final slate of American Rescue Plan Act funding allocations as presented by staff. So you can do that, Charlie?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. I'm Charles Young. I'm the town's assistant town administrator for finance. I'm here tonight to present to you what we are calling the final slate of ARPA allocations. The reason we're calling it that is we're asking you to vote an omnibus table that has the final budget as we are predicting it will be for all 130 plus projects we have for ARPA. The issue we are faced with is that while we have 2 more years until December 2026 to spend all of our ARPA funds, the federal government has issued a different deadline this December 31st, which is called the obligation deadline. Obligation here means putting things under contract or putting them in purchase. Doesn't mean we have to spend them by that time, but it means that we're on a very short timeline to get these things under contract. We've had some projects turn back money. So we're, in accordance with the memo, we're asking you to newly allocate $667,400 that were turned back from different projects that either weren't gonna make the timelines that were established or weren't gonna be completed at all. And so the allocations break down as follows. First, we're asking for $275,000 to be allocated to departmental vehicles. This is for a DPW dump truck, a police cruiser, a fire admin vehicle, and a building department staff vehicle. These are ideal targets for ARPA this late in the spending timeline because they're very easy for us to operate. So in other words, in the next 6 weeks, we'll be able to get these under contract and under purchase order, so that they can be spent by the deadline. The next allocations are $225,400 for school classroom technology equipment, $107,000 for police uniforms and equipment, and $60,000 for fire equipment. And there are descriptions of each of those in the memo that's circulated, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And I believe Tyler is on Zoom if you'd like to add.
Oh, yes, I'm also here. Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie. So 2 quick questions. The vehicles, I assume are gonna be electric.
So where feasible, the town policy is where feasible, that dump truck, we won't be able to purchase as electric. I'm not even sure they make a hybrid at this point for a dump truck of that size.
Okay.
The police cruiser, if the board wishes they all 3 to be electric, the police cruiser could be, the fire admin vehicle. Those are also difficult to have be an EV just due to the nature of the size of those vehicles. They're usually SUVs. But we can communicate that to the fire department if that's people will definitely be electric.
Yeah, they do make that.
Yeah, it's, I don't think the fire department has an electric, staff vehicle yet, but we can certainly work with the chief on that for this week.
Yeah, so I'd like the ministry to, recommend that these were, that we can do electric, if at all possible.
Yeah.
Early to dump truck. And then my second question is related to the school equipment versus classrooms. And we've had ongoing discussion about the mini CIP for the schools, which is related to deferred maintenance and such. If we didn't do this, how are classroom technologies budgeted for the school?
So these are, I've been working with Fun on this. They've done inventory over the summer.
Yeah.
The equipment was, originally purchased as part of the building renovation.
Yeah.
And there was no plan for a refreshment schedule. So she, was growing concerned because there was no, funding identified, to replace the vehicle, the equipment. And she was worried that there would be some failures that would happen that ultimately, would be pretty serious because all of the equipment is around the same age. So typically this would be something that the schools would be funding in the operating budget. But we have in the past had major CIP project requests related to technology. So I would imagine that if they couldn't absorb it in their operating budget, they would be requesting a capital item.
So the Pierce.
Yeah.
The equipment, I assume that's gonna be potentially heavily technology supported. Which is funded from.
From the
capital.
project budget.
From the project.
Yeah.
And we would need to make sure that
They need to
somebody,
plan
they
for,
need to.
yes, they need to plan for a technology refresh. So we put all of our, computer leases we lease our computers because that forces us to
Yeah.
actually build in a refreshment schedule.
Right. And they're not doing that.
I don't believe that they have leases for their.
That's practice. Sure. Refresh.
Okay, any other questions? John?
I admit that going over the numbers, I'm having a little trouble with getting my head around a couple of questions. At this point, are there unexpended monies that are gonna have to be turned back to the federal government?
So we have until December 2026 to spend. So what that means is that today, we have to, the deadline was today, yes, the answer is yes, there'd be a lot of money. But we have 2 more years with all of our sub-recipients and our town partners. Now, if we didn't do this vote today, and a month and a half went by, if we didn't, vote, these allocations and then somehow encumber these funds, then this money would have to be turned back. If we need to, their stipulation is, we really, in the last year, only this the crucial point. The stipulation is that it gets into an encumbrance or a contract, so a purchase order and a contract by this December 31st. So right now, Bernard, I'm sorry, John, the answer is no. Well, I don't.
So we both have a little.
I'll give myself to say one little bit. So, so the answer is no. Right now, we're not projecting funds to be turned back. If it does happen in the end, right now, looking at the project list, that some funds are turned back, it would be hundreds or below thousands of trail offs from subrecipient projects that finish on the budget. Right now, we're not projecting the turn.
What if one of our contracts fails?
That's the key question. So Tyler can jump in, but there are, stipulations in the federal rules for ARPA that say if a contractor fails to fulfill their contract, you can take essentially the same scope and contract and move it to a new. That is basically the only situation after this December 31st where we're allowed to change how we've allocated our funds. Otherwise, all the allocations have to sort of freeze out.
Because it always has to be more good. If people go down the list, and I urge that they do, from the spreadsheet, one of the things that kind of jumps off the page is, there's any number of, items, that some of them are under the town's control, and some of them were, under the control of nonprofits in the community. But there's any number of them that are turning back substantial amounts of money. I mean, are unspent, substantial amounts of money. And I mean, I'm just gonna pick one off the page. I won't mention the organization, but, $477,000, reduced budget, for that, organization under their ARPA grant. I'm thinking we have sort of learned some lessons from this first time experience as to how to gauge, the ability of not only our own departments, but also, community organizations to actually.
Charlie, I can jump here on this one. So with that reduction that you're talking about, it is a little confusing how we're displaying this on the sheet, but if you go to the last page, the Brookline Teen Center, I think that's the one you're talking about, John. That is actually, that was a partial reimbursement from Norfolk County. So we show those as a deduction, but we have the note on the side that will either say full, or it'll say reallocation or reimbursement from the county. So then we're just making those adjustments in the column as so and shifting them downward. But as far as as far as the subrecipients go, we have not had any turnbacks. And we're not expecting any turnbacks either.
So yeah, just to clarify, the reason it's shown that way is we want you to vote a slate that has the final count and allocation in the correct budget column. And so if Norfolk County is paying for it, we moved it to a separate table on the last page just for the Norfolk County.
Okay.
But if you have any questions about any projects on here that were reduced, like Tyler and I are happy to jump in.
Follow-up question, is Norfolk County then in charge of tracking, the spending of the limit of that money, those monies, and the determination as to whether unspent monies need to be returned?
So yeah, it's essentially Norfolk County is responsible for their own allotment. And
Right.
we are like a subrecipient to Norfolk County. So
Right.
we're reporting to Norfolk the same way our subrecipients are reporting. They have their funds, and the way that those were expended will be audited separately from our funds.
But we have to, in terms of contracts for the Norfolk County paid project.
Correct, absolutely. So the way that it's worked is those are essentially reimbursements. So we enter into a contract, we spend money, and then we submit it to Norfolk County for reimbursement. And so yeah, that.
One more if I may. So, all right, now I have a clear picture of the fact that there has not been a lot of money, unspent.
Not by ourselves.
Okay, so, now we sort of take the other sort of extreme, which is they're all saying that they're all going to be able to spend all the money, right, at this point. And maybe they will be able to spend all the money. But is any auditing done to sort of look at, well, yeah, they spent the money, but hey, what did they spend it on? How does that compare to what they said they were going to spend it on? And by some measure, did they actually produce anything as a result of spending that money? You know, did they said this expenditure of money is going to help create this, and this, or improve this, and this? Is there going to be any look at sort of whether that was accomplished by these organizations?
Tyler, do you want to jump in on that one since you've been handling the quarterly reporting with all the subrecipients?
Yes, so we do provide a level of oversight with the subrecipients, but they're subject to audit just like us. It's highlighted in our town subrecipient agreements, and we also make sure that they're abiding by the same record retention schedule that we are. That's also the advice when I have these pre-award meetings with each of the subrecipients to nonprofits, to tell them and remind them of that as well, that we still have oversight. We still need to see invoices. One of the goals, which may alleviate, or it may answer your question, one of the goals moving into next calendar year is to have these quarterly reports published alongside this list, which will be published hopefully after this meeting or tomorrow. But the quarterly reports, we're planning on trying to get these online so that anyone can also see the same invoices, payments, as long as there's no personal information for beneficiaries in there, which we would redact. But as far as the oversight piece goes, we still are looking at their expenses and we're reporting those out. They have the same quarterly reporting requirements to us that we have to the Treasury and to Norfolk County. So we're doing our due diligence to make sure that we're getting that information.
Thank you. Good questions, John. So the amount of money that's remaining, we have requirements for ourselves that we have to come with the money. Right, we committed it. I assume that means you have a contract or some proof of the money. Are we requiring the same thing with the subrecipients? I see, there's an organization here that's almost $1 million that is remaining. Have they demonstrated to us that they have committed the money in a contract signed? Or, and if not, are we going to implement something that says by this date, if you don't have this money encumbered, we're pulling it back?
So great question, John. Great question, Paul. I'm happy to answer, but I think Tyler has maybe a better answer.
Okay.
So to this piece, our subrecipient agreements, I'm going to point back to that. They're robust enough to still have those requirements as well. And when they're providing reporting, I'll call out Brookline Housing Authority for one. We have a $6 million project with them for capital improvements to Egmont and Trustman apartments. And we're still having them provide us the information when they're putting out a request for proposal. They're going through procurement requirements. We're actually getting their awards, looking at their bids as well, or actually looking at their bid responses, I should say. So we're looking at every piece because we want them to be able to spend that money down. And the piece here is after the 31st, if there is a clawback from a subrecipient, that does go back to the Treasury, which isn't to raise alarm bells, but it's to say that we can't reclaim the money and then redisperse it.
We can't. So I would just like to add on. So thank you for that. What I would add, and it helps answer John's question too, which is that Tyler and Nicole, our office and I have been meeting with subrecipients over the summer and over the past several months to get them up to date on their quarterly reports, to understand their spending timelines, And we have had no concerns among the few of us and in our office about any of the subrecipients not being able to meet those spending deadlines. We were prepared, just a few months ago, Chaz and I were crafting messages that said, hey, listen, if you can't demonstrate X, Y, and Z to us, to pull back money from a few of these organizations. We were glad that we didn't have to do that. We didn't feel like we needed to do that. Where you're seeing $1 million left, they are still on track to spend that at the rate that they had told us they would spend.
So
Sure.
I appreciate that. You said as much as, if they demonstrated X, Y, Z. What is X, Y, Z?
Right, so like Tyler was saying, they're up to date on their current quarterly reports, telling us exactly what they've spent, what's under contract, and that they have met their existing, so essentially, in their subrecipient agreement, in their proposal, met the timeline that they proposed for spending money in Parsons. So it's essentially, we have, you know, nobody is off track or behind on their ability to spend this down by December 2026. And in fact, many projects need that time, the next 2 years, to actually get to completion. Many of our town projects won't be completed by this December. They'll need additional time. You know, I appreciate the question. I think it is something to be absolutely laser focused on, you know, making sure that our subrecipients, we have less control over what they're doing versus what town departments are doing. But to this point, we haven't had any concerns with any of our subrecipients not meeting their timelines, not meeting the deadlines they set forth in their proposal for their project. So hopefully that answers the question.
But we're not requiring to give us a signed contract that says the money's gonna be spent.
Oh, no, we are.
So if they need to hire someone to go reconstruct the building for them, are we asking them to have signed contracts?
Yes, we're actually, as Tyler said, we're asking them for the RFP or the bid. We're asking them for the bid responses. We're asking them for the award letter, and we're asking them for essentially every piece of documentation along the way.
Okay, yep, that's all. Thank you.
And
Yeah.
I want to really pick back up on Charlie's point as well. One of the things too with why most of our subrecipients are on track to be spent down by calendar year 26 is something that the town is dealing with that subrecipients are not subject to. Most of our subrecipients, actually not most, all of our subrecipients are not subject to the same procurement requirements from the state that the town is, which have shown in most cases to actually be way more rigorous than the federal requirements. So it does give subrecipients a little bit more latitude in terms of being able to move money around much quicker than the town. So I just want to highlight that point as well.
John?
I'm very grateful for the answers, but I'm having a hard time squaring a couple of things you've said so far. Because on the one hand, if I understood correctly, nobody has had to turn anything back, and everyone is still budgeted for spending all of the money that they originally budgeted to spend. But then I see $1 million item that says canceled on the spreadsheet. And I see the utility item, which we're all quite familiar with, because we've done a lot of discussion of this. And my understanding from the last discussion we had of this is that we're never going to be able to spend the some 500,000 plus of the money that is set aside for utility help for utility customers. So why would that still be carried?
So the canceled project was never awarded, as far as if it's the project I'm thinking that you're identifying. It never actually. So that was not, we don't consider that a turn back. It didn't end up with going.
Yeah.
As to, what was the other half?
Well, the utility.
Right, so the utility debt, project has a small balance in it because the expenditures you're seeing here are as of September. We ran into it, some red tape over the summer, getting our agreement with Eversource finalized.
Yeah.
It just took a long time to get done. It's done. We're cutting the check to them. So the next version of this table, like next quarter, we'll have that spent down. If you look, we transferred money out of the utility debt in the adjustments column. We transferred money out in round 3 to support, or maybe round 2, to support other projects. So that has been reduced, and the current budget should read something like 40,000, which is the remaining amount to cut a check. Yeah.
Okay, and then getting back to the million that was canceled.
Right.
Was that reallocated to other programs?
Yes, that was reallocated around for you.
Okay. Are there any other examples like that?
Okay, so to be clear, right, so we're allocating $600,000 tonight. So there are some other turnbacks. The main turnback that we're seeing is for ARPA personnel. So, earlier this year, we heard from the federal government that we were no longer going to be able to cover any personnel except for grant administration personnel after it's December 31st, because you can't obligate personnel expense, the argument. And so, we have found ways to shift and move those folks around, except for one position that will need to be funded in FY '26, or is currently planned to be funded in FY '26. But $600,000 from all of those different positions that were initially planned to be funded through ARPA for the next 2 years, is being turned down. And there are other turnbacks too. There was funding for language access that wasn't needed because we hired a position through the override. The library bookmobile was not able to, they weren't able to find a vehicle in time to obligate the expense by next month. The COA van is being funded by a state grant, and the disparity study finished well under budget. At a lower cost. So all of those funds have been turned back. So that's what we're asking. We're asking you to finally,
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Yes,
Yes.
I have a question about the county reimbursements for town and public school employees. So is that also a turn back of a source, if given that there's a reimbursement, or does that get categorized that way?
So great question. What you'll probably see there is that we initially budgeted some amount of money for it, and the adjustment brings it down because we submitted it to Norfolk County. So it appears, you may not have the table in front of you, it's on in the packet. It appears on a bottom table specific to Norfolk County. So, in other words, for us, it's a net zero, right? We essentially expended the money and they're paying it back to us. It's not included in the final budget for the town. Tyler added, that's not.
This may be for Melissa or Jeff, so, you said it quick, Charlie, but it caught my attention, grant funded positions. ARPA funded positions that you're gonna need to transition.
Right.
Do we know how many positions, there's only one position that's gonna transition to the town budget? And how many positions are gonna continue to be funded through ARPA?
Tyler and the office.
What?
We have,
There's two, okay, but there's two, I don't need to know. There's two.
right, two grant administration.
No, I just want to say, it's the thing was here, that $5 million was the previous year. And so that was allocated a while ago. And then when the county agreed to pick up that tab, that was a long process between us and the county about whether or not they would do that. Yeah, very, very good. That came off our books. And went to the county's books. But what you're seeing here is not, we're asking you to reallocate all this tonight. Some of this you reallocated in round 3, some of it you reallocated in the summer and called round 3 to 5. The memo talks about what's new. But the reason why we want you to vote this final slate is to just be sure that we have one single document that is all our ARPA projects. We don't have to go looking through memos from the summer and spring and so forth to do the money trail. Where we want this as our document. And then we're able to say, this is what the board voted, these are the projects, this is how much they're funded for, done, we're spending.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, then I move approval of the ARPA reallocation as we discussed on all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac. Aye. By Simon. Aye. Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Crowe.
Aye.
And Chair votes aye.
Yeah, can I just say thank you to people who have been dragging.
Thank you, Tyler.
Plus, Tyler, Nicole, and Charlie have done an extraordinary job.
We all thank you.
Thank y'all.
Okay, next, we have, our tax classification here. And the introduction of our new assessor.
I'd actually like to do a little introduction. So good evening, Lincoln Henry, the town's Director of Finance. And we have our entire Board of Assessors here. So in addition to Harold Peterson and Mark Mazur, who the board knows very well, and we're fortunate to have both here in general. We also have our brand new Chief Assessor who is in his third week. And so this is a big ask of him in the third week to do the tax classification hearing and do the presentation, but we're very fortunate to have him at Costigan. He comes with several years of great experience in assessing in Massachusetts. I like to kind of think of it as a monkhood sometimes, or in that it's a very specialized piece of set of information and skills, but that comes to us and we're very fortunate. So the only other thing I wanted to mention, and Ted will be giving the presentation, we're both here, all four of us, to answer questions. The only other thing I want to mention is obviously normally we have this presentation on the screen. We don't really have a very good screen here. However, Tiffany is running the slides for those at home. For those of you who have your laptops, you can view it, and then also have the paper printouts. So hopefully we can relatively seamlessly follow it. So, but with that, I'll turn to Ted and.
Thank you, Lincoln. Privileged to be here in front of you guys today. I wanted to just mention Rashid, is 35 years in this town, and you know, definitely a very helpful person to have. So once in a while to call him. So I just want to thank him. But
He retired from the Montford town.
he's retired from Montford, yeah. So wish him well in retirement. So Dr. Peterson and Mr. Major and I just wanted to prepare for you the tax classification hearing. This is for fiscal year 25. The purpose of the hearing is to establish a residential factor that shifts the burden of the tax rate to the commercial class from the residential. Absent doing that, it would be one tax rate. So it puts more of the burden of taxation on the commercial class, which is very typical for cities and towns in Massachusetts. The second part is to really shift that burden from the residents who live, own and occupy their residential property to those that don't in the residential class. So that would be the adoption of the residential exemption, the percentage we want to do within the residential exemption. Just as a reminder, last year, the select board decided to do the maximum shift of the levy, the 1.75 shift. And the select board decided to do a 20% residential exemption. So we go on the next page. Just want to go through the values from this past evaluation year with a lien date of 1/1/24. So this is the fair cash value of properties in Brookline as of that lien date on the 1st of January. We saw a valuation increase in residential properties of 3.8%. We saw commercial values increase by 2.4%, and personal property increased by about 13.8%. And that was mostly due to new equipment by Instar and National Grid as they laid more pipelines and conduit and poles. At the bottom of the page, you can see the average value change. So in that residential class, single families were up about 4%, condos recovered, continue to recover from COVID, they're up 2.6%. 2 and 3 families, based on our evaluations, were flat, and apartments were up 10%. That is as rents are still increasing and vacancy rates are going down further than they were last year. Commercial was up 6.7% over last year, value change. Going on to the next page, growth, which is a very important part of our levy and a very important part of our revenue stream for the city. Our single family permits have brought in $900,000 in growth. Our residential condominiums, which are generally when a condominium is established, new growth from a 2-family conversion was about $315,000. Our apartment class, which includes the Newbury Brookline assisted living and the 250 unit apartment building in Hancock Village, with the majority of that $1.3 million in growth. Commercial was down, around 90,000, and personal property again with the new pipelines, conduits, poles, and then, Instar and National Grid, about, just over $500,000 in growth. So our total growth for the city, for the town, so I'm gonna get into that, was 3 point. Yeah, yeah.
Good trouble.
I messed it up too, so don't.
Yeah. Thank you. Just under 3.2 million in both. So how does that relate to the levy? In Massachusetts general law states that they do last year's levy, which is 282.8 million. By state law, we're allowed to add on, for Prop 2.5% of that levy, which is $7 million. The new growth comes on at 3.1. Our override for year 2 of a 3-year override, that's 2.8 million, getting us to a maximum levy of 295 million. And then with our debt exclusions that were voted for the high school, the Driscoll School, the Ridley School, the Pierce School, and the fire station, that gets our total levy, the amount we can collect in tax dollars from Brookline taxpayers, right at $318 million.
Let me ask you a question and clarify something. 2.5% is not something we do, it's something the state puts on our levy. And that may sound, like a minor point, but.
Yeah, we
And
are.
you need to know that, probably 2.5 does certain things beyond our scope.
So we do have an option, I mean, we would have the option to not do the Prop 2.5, but it's just very typical of probably all city towns that we elect to enact or to adopt 2.5, yeah. As part of,
Or we could choose not to do it.
you could.
It's unlikely that you would, or anyway.
If I may, right, so proposition, so the 2.5% increase in the total levy is the allowable by the state. But to be clear, right, the town meeting appropriates what the amount is that's needed to raise the vast majority of the levy. And so it's what town meeting appropriates in essence.
And, well, they take the 282,880,000 and, the maximum level of levy of 295,990, we're seeing a 4.6% more or less increase in available funds. And I'm leaving out, that.
Just going back to the previous chart on FY 25 new growth. I see that commercial sort of pales in comparison to the other classes. And you mentioned, for instance, that for multifamily, the 1.3 million was primarily from Hancock Village. Do we know from what came the 90,000 growth in commercial?
I know we're finishing the hotel with the major, so the front page of the packet, the Iris Hotel, was finished this year. And I can get you the other one.
Can we go back to the average value change? So, single family condos were changed, increased 4.2%, residential condos 6%, 2 and 3 families flat. Those are all kind of residential. Value based on, there's a valuation method. That's based on comparables, right? Apartments are based on revenue, right? So essentially, the apartments are increasing their value because their income has increased so substantially, right? This is a very important, I want to make a point. This is a very important point. And when we start getting into a discussion about how we're shifting money around in residential extension. Single family homeowners, residential condos, 2 or 3 families, they typically don't have access to that value. It's not cash flow, right? It's just value. They need to tap into it by selling it or taking out some sort of mortgage, second mortgage to tap into that value. The apartments, they're actually getting revenue, it's income. So they get immediate access to those funds. I think it's just a very important point. And also commercial, 6.7%. Those are income. Now, of course, they're possibly increased quite a bit, with some of the commercial, some of the restaurants. But when we get back to, the residential exemption, I really want us to focus on the difference between, growth because an asset is increasing in value because of real estate. And the apartment valuation increasing because they're charging for more rent, right? They're inflating rents, they're increasing rents. And when we start shifting, if we're not maximizing the residential exemption, increasing it, we're giving money back to the apartment owners that are making significant revenue. And they never credit the money back to the renters. You don't see a rent decrease $100 because, or $50 a month, because, you know, there was a shift over to the single family and residential. So I just want to make that point. I think it's really an important point to start talking about the residential tax exemption.
There's actually something else, at least I think it does, at least a little bit, affects that increase in value. The rental ones, the rental units. Commercial, right. The eligible parcels, parcels eligible for the residential exemption, really down. It suggests that, some units that were formerly owner occupied are being occupied by renters. Is that a reasonable inference?
You just repeat that question.
So the number of eligible, the number of eligible parcels in 2022 for the residential exemption was 10,071. It's down to in 24. It's down to 9,836. So my assumption is there's going to shift from owner occupied to rented. Is that a fair?
Yeah, so just if there's apartments, like if you have a 250 unit apartment building, it's one parcel.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yes, looking at that, it would mean there's probably more, 3 families that are being rented, possibly more single families that are being rented. We're about 79% at, owner occupied single families. So I'd have to go back to the data, but it could be a number of things that have to kind of look into that.
Okay.
Do you see the residential parcel decrease?
The owner occupied units also is going down.
Yeah, on page 3.
Well, it's going from 9910 to 9832.
Yeah. And this second year in a row, maybe other years, it's done that.
And I don't trust it.
Yeah, it's,
People buying them.
right, well, it's,
Get it done.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, it's an interesting point from, last night we had a lot of discussions about investors buying properties to rent out. That's a kind of that, there's some of that. But it also, as that shift occurs, it increases the amount of value on the commercial side, on the investor on residential property. There's a small shift there as well. So the 10% increase in value in large commercial that is at least a little bit offset by that. Okay.
Just gonna go back to page 10, just to walk through the residential exemption.
We don't want to stand back to go.
We derailed them from.
Yeah, I do want to say to staff that I've driven the first 3 weeks are awesome at vetting all residential exemptions, so there's definitely compliance that's happening.
Oh, well, I'm not putting,
So,
not.
That's good too.
Yeah.
Maybe part of why it's going down, but, yeah. So the residential exemption, we just take all the residential values, this is on page 10, slide 10. Total residential parcel count, 17,286, it's division problems. We have the average residential value, just over 1.7 million. If we were to select a 20% residential factor, we're exempting $346,536 in value from owner occupied residential properties. The bottom there, so at that 20%, that would mean, based on a full shift, the maximum allowable shift in the classification, it would give us a $10.04 tax rate. So that savings to, the residential probably over 34.79. So the value of the residential exemption would be $3,479. That compares last year, over the years, up about $200 over last year. Yeah. So then getting to the graphs and kind of explaining the different options. The median tax change, the median taxpayer would see each of these classifications. So a single family under a maximum shift of the levy and a 20% residential exemption would see about 7.4% increase in their tax bill. Just as a side, like most of that is if you took the override of the debt exclusion, that's kind of what is also contributing to that. I know that's a point in the past that we've raised. The condos are going to see about a 4.8% tax change. The 2 and 3 families are, sort of lower than that. And the apartment class, to your point, remember it's about a 10% increase on the tax change year over year. Skipping ahead and just you kind of look at the next few slides, gives you like the percent. So like I said, single family 79% owner occupied, condos are 52% owner occupied. You can see all the percentage median tax changes. Our apartments are getting only about 4% owner occupied. See a 10% increase in tax, and the commercial will not be affected by the residential exemption. It would be a 4.8% change in tax. So kind of bringing it to this slide 16. It just gives you the option not to shift to the max. So we're, again, shifting to the max is the 1.749. It's rounding to the tax rate. That gives you the $10.04 rate and a $16.86 rate. The change in tax rates at the bottom of the page is basically the same, 2.76, 2.74. So each classification of property, whether it's commercial, industrial, personal property, or it's residential, is getting that 2.76% change in the tax rate. Going down the line, you can see the effect of not going to the max. It picks up by a penny the residential rate, tax rate, while dropping the CIP, which is commercial, industrial, personal property, down about 10 cents on the tax rate for every 1% on the factor that you're not maximizing. Just going on to the next page, I'm just giving you that if you went to 19% of the residential exemptions, if you lowered it a little bit, it would take the apartment median tax change down to 9.5%, while putting the condos from about a 4.5% change up to an 8% median tax change. So just that slight 1% reduction in the residential exemption would again change the condo median tax up about 4% from 4 to 8, and only drop the apartments about a 0.5% up there. I give all the numbers and the options for that. And then I did just want to do like just a direct comparison of charts on page 22 or slide 22. It just gives you, I know it's a little difficult to read, but you can see just that effect of going that 1% down. It does slightly lower the apartment median tax, but you increase the single family tax 0.2 of a percentage point, with the condos go from about 4.8 to 8%. Alternatively, if you went to 21%, the other way, on the next slide, 23, you're going to increase apartment median tax change up to just under 11%, and the condos would go to about 1.5 on a tax change. So I tried to give you like two options, either way you went last year, 19 and 21. And obviously on the last page of the presentation, you can see the effect of that, like I said, not maximizing that shift. For every sort of 1% you don't maximize it, it kind of ticks it up 1% on the tax rate of residential, and it draws it down on the commercial, industrial, personal property. Any questions on those?
If we go back to slide number 12, I understand, or I think I understand, that you're applying sort of flat formulas to each class.
Excuse me, Ted, you give me a packet.
Oh, yeah.
My book is not, it's not accurate.
Great. Yep.
I'm just curious why three-family homes have such a lower, median tax change percentage compared to two. I would almost think logically would be the reverse.
Yeah, so we saw three family valuations flat this year. That's basically why. So think of it as everyone else kind of went up in value, they didn't. But when Prop 2.5 comes in, basically, they're not seeing the value change, so their tax rate has to kind of not go up to kind of fit it within.
From a policy perspective, though, as we look at shifts, is that something that we want to address, or what do the other members think in terms of how we want to shift the residential burden?
The shift. We don't, it's not a fine grain shift, right? That's the problem.
Yeah.
Right?
So the only shift that, so you can't shift, for example, between two family homes and within. The only two options in this context are what amount is being shifted from residential to commercial industrial personal property, and then how much, what percent the residential exemption is. But the residential exemption, right, so that the total dollar amount is the same from a two-family to a three-family, right? So if the value is flat for three families and goes up for two families and one family, and single-family homes, then, by definition, those tax rates will go up higher than the three. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I want to make sure I understand what I'm looking at here.
Slide 16.
Well, he's consolidated.
I'm sort of trying to consolidate
Composite.
these three.
Yep.
And the top one is 20%, the middle one is 19, so with the 19%, that would be represent the smallest increase, because that's the lowest number, in tax increase for residential. That doesn't make sense either. I'm reading something wrong.
Because that's the rate without the residential exemption. Right, when you lower the residential exemption.
Oh, got it. Okay, so it's not good.
Right. But when you raise the residential exemption, tax for everyone who doesn't have it.
Yeah, that's what, that's why I was looking at this and saying, wait a minute, it's back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, that's exactly right. Yeah.
The residential exemption shifts it to non-resident.
Correct.
Including commercial.
Yeah.
Have we ever, looked at 22%?
Sorry, just to correct one thing there. The residential exemption is a shift of the residential class.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I just, the overall shift.
Oh, just
Top
not
box.
It doesn't have to.
Yeah, I think it's important, from my perspective, I think it's important to think of it.
That's important.
First, you decide the commercial industrial personal property shift. If the board decides to do that, and if so, by how much. Then, here's the total residential. Then that's option number 2, right? Here's the total residential. How much is being shifted between those parcels being occupied by the owner and those ones?
So the question I have, and it's not clear in my. Sorry.
I'll do it. Have we ever looked at 22%, as a residential?
Yeah.
Is that in? I didn't see it last year. I have a feeling we did, yeah.
So I have 20, I'm just gonna get 22.
Yeah, so we have many iterations, but we didn't want to overwhelm you with.
Yeah, typically what we do, if there
So-
are things you want to see, next
Yeah.
week we'll bring them back so that you can see different scenarios.
But we haven't told well, we're not meeting next week.
For the next time we review.
Yeah, well, if I may, I'll just formally make, so we also.
Totally, it'll drop the condo down below the median tax last year, and it will put up the apartment to above 11% tax change. Okay. So that, yeah, I can give exact numbers for you, but it would drop the condo below 0, push the apartments up.
So, one thing I do want to point out is that when we,
if we shift more of the burden to, investment of the department, that burden gets picked up by the renter. Because they're rentable.
So, so this is my question, this is what I'm wrestling with. Is
Yeah.
that the commercial, large commercial rental properties have been cranking up the rent because it's market demand, right? Supply and demand, they're making a ton of money, right? I mean, we got a tour, so anyway, they're charging quite a bit of rent, beautiful place, yeah, but charging a lot of rent. That's income for them, right? But, and I'd like to understand that, maybe, and I actually don't, I'm not certain that they can just pass it on to the renter because they're already getting maximum market value.
Well,
That's what they're doing, right?
That's true.
The market dictates, I want to debate, it. The market dictates what they can get for rent, and they're not by, the beautiful hearts they have, lowering the rent because they don't, they're concerned, right? They're meeting market demand. So how do we make sure that, those that are greatly benefiting financially from real estate market, and rental market, help carry the burden here? I think they've already shifted the cost to the renters. And I'd like to maybe find the right balance.
It's an interesting question to that. I was on the past, the conversation that, well, a landlord doesn't, especially a larger landlord, charges rent based on what the market is there, not based on whether taxes go up and down. But there's another whole group of people who, smaller investors in there, and typically when you sign a lease, the lease requires you to pay any increase that the landlord chooses in taxes if the landlord chooses to pass along. And a lot of landlords do that. So I'm just wondering whether it's true that well, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to pass the burden on to the landlord, but I wonder whether that's the actual effect.
Well, so like, just a follow-up to the mayor, I'm not sure about, when I was working, I don't remember the tax being assigned into the tax being part of the lease. Maybe that's what 2 and 3 families.
Yeah, it depends on.
What 2 and 3 families are doing, but the large commercial, rental properties do not. What could be really helpful is to understand what percentage of our renters in Brookline are in these commercial rental properties versus how many are in the 2 and 3 families. Is there any way to get that information?
Maybe some planning. Yeah, we can definitely look at our 2 and 3 families and, even the percentage owner occupied, assume, the 3 families.
Well, just have to how many units are rental properties total, or in 2 and 3 families? And how many total rental units are in properties that are 4 and 3? That would help us. I don't understand how much would be affected.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no,
If we could maybe charge more to the large commercial owners, it affects fewer renters. And the others, the 2 and 3, I suspect maybe the vast majority, a large percentage of them are in the 2 and 3, which would stay at the residential rate. Right?
Yeah, assuming that they're, that they are, yeah. So we have 63% owner occupancy in 2 families, 34% of 3 families. Parcelized. So, that's just it. One data point.
Yeah, but you understand, I'm looking for total number of units. How many units of rental, how many rental units in 2 and 3 families? How many rental units in, large?
Yep. We can go on that.
And you have this unit, or is it small by parcel?
We value apartments by just a parcel. So we have to, but in that valuation, we're looking at how many units there are, what the makeup of the unit is, 2 bed, 3 bed, 4 bed, and then, the capital.
The assessor database has, there's an apartment, either 2 or 3 family, and how many units.
Exactly, yeah.
And database also includes rental property or rental units in condominiums.
Yes,
Oh,
because we know whether or not they're, getting residential exemption, so we can refer it in that area. Yes. In the
That's
actual,
me interesting, thinking on how many renters within home.
so I think it's 52% are getting residential exemption, so 48% of our farmers are renters. Residential housing. As of the last, like, 1/1/24.
Well, sometimes it is, I mean, there's a building, an investor, technically. There's a building,
I'm not invested, except my own property.
there's a building attached to, that's part of our condo that where, some people, there are a couple of apartments that are owned by people who live in different apartments. So,
I guess the thing,
but it's been.
the reason why I'm asking for this, and it just would be helpful to understand a next level of detail about how we're affecting our residents and how many residents. It's hard to think about properties and you're shifting the number of properties or parcels, to understand actually how many residents we're affecting. It's the residents that we hear from, not the parcel. So I think that type of analysis would be really helpful. And I agree with John, if we could have a 22% residential exemption.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing is really difficult is that whole in our lives. When you look at commercial development class, you're looking at buildings that range from 6 units to 200.
Yeah.
And so the micro, I mean, can't separate those out. So the impact there is going to be huge. You know, you will have small ones who will feel compelled to pass the burden through. Whereas larger, to your point, larger buildings might not feel that compelled.
Well, that makes, understanding the percentage of, I don't know what the threshold would be, Chaz.
Yeah.
You raise a good point, is it 6 when you typically see the rent, to charge? Again, I think they're already probably charging market rate. The smaller ones may be relational, setting the rent at the relationship level versus market, right? But as you start getting up larger, the costs are higher, they're probably getting what they can.
The margins there.
Yeah.
And that becomes.
Again, I just think it's helpful to start thinking about residents and like the number of people that we affect and we should affect it. And I appreciate that it's not just a residential exemption. If we wanted to shift some money over to commercial, rental properties, you have to shift to do the first shift, right? That's commercial residential. So, we may, we had various rates here to shift?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
You know, the 20% option on slide 16, it demonstrates, the percentage drop off of that selected CIP shift factor. So all the way down to a 1.7 shift, it's like 1.5. So, you can see the difference.
How many games? Two times the study.
And talk to, new professor and Nathan and others. So I figured stuff out.
This how
Make sure we, yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah, make sure that we're clear on what we're trying to do.
This is how we do it.
So we
Oh,
finished,
well,
we
let's
finished
take public comment.
No, I say we got
Okay, so let's, open the public, hearing, and to me, is there anyone who would like to speak? I can see a couple people on the field.
There's no one that signed up in advance. If you're joining us online and would like to speak on the tax classification, please raise your hand using the raise your hand feature. And is there anyone in the room who wishes to speak?
Stop.
No one is indicating their desire to speak.
Okay.
It's confusing everything.
Okay. One more time.
When will we do this?
December.
Yeah.
We have to set the tax rate. Yeah.
And we're meeting 2 times before.
Yes, 17th.
So we need time to get back, so ready for
we-
really, the timeline that we've established is really tight because
The date we have to decide is our next meeting, which is
December 30th.
December 3rd.
because, as Melissa point, we need the deck those and get them.
Right, there is some risk that there will be time to do this, right?
Yeah, so we need to have a meeting.
Yeah, we have a meeting here. and
Yeah.
everything, yeah. Okay. All right,
Yes.
I think we all will acknowledge that this is an extraordinarily busy week for the family. And, I'm not sure that the absence of people that are hearing part of this is indicative of lack of interest. I think it's perhaps lack of awareness. Is it possible to, in a sense, extend the hearing to our next meeting, to allow for the possibility that there might be some people who didn't realize this would be their own thing?
Sure, I mean, that gives us the rest of an opportunity to incorporate it. Yeah, but, you know, that's, we can do that.
Okay.
We can do that. Okay. And, yeah, we received, email from Tom Elwakowski, so there are a number of people who are, and he especially is always. Yeah, he's always interested, in this hearing. So, the fact that no one is, speaking up right now doesn't mean that, people are having very, very attention to what we're doing.
And not to put too great a burden on staff, but, if it would be possible also to have, a couple of things. A table that shows, what the percentage tax increase was from year to year for, like a 5-year look back. Yeah. For all of them, you know, categories there. And, what was the other thing? I think that would kind of cover, excuse me, also just a kind of a graph with 10 lines that shows, you know, there's a 10 line, this is what is happening to this class, this is what is happening to this class, we get a sense of the overall, over a 5-year period.
Yeah.
Sharing of the tax burden between the various classes.
I can email with you today, but I'll also send an email with that.
I appreciate it, you know,
Perfect.
yeah, thanks.
the other thing is, going to ask you something. It's called, you find it, the composite, taking the list, taking the bottom 2 lines of the 19%, 22%, 21%, and putting them all in a single page, looking at these, the differences. You follow, slide 16 is one, yeah, 21. You can start with that one.
All right, yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's, really for me, it's, really mean.
Yeah, another question I have, I haven't asked yet. With the assessors in the room, and, you know, they're collected of knowledge of things and so on. It feels like we have tried our best to spare commercial property to excessive burden, recognizing that, you know, public is done very hard and so on. Especially, you know, retail restaurants and office. Has the time come when there's been a lot of healing in the commercial properties, and that maybe we could seriously consider whether we need to maybe, you know, once again resume giving them their due share of the burden of taxes, so that where other classes might be going up 6, 7, 8% a year, and they're only going up 1, 2% a year, if we can even it out a little bit. I'm looking at Harold.
Yeah, I
know.
The most we can do is the maximum shift.
That's true, I mean, yeah.
That's what we're doing, right? I understand.
That, I mean, from hearing from what the board is thinking, that's what you probably be pursuing. Well, it's 1.75, and the residential factor, and, you know, it's rounding, 7.
The only other thing we could do is follow their rules and,
Yes.
It's probably too late for public comment.
We're still on.
I'd love to say something as an economist, but not on behalf of the board of trustees.
Sure.
Can you state your name?
Harold Peterson. The home ownership rate is down all over the country. It's down massively. It's because it's so difficult to buy a house. Both because of high house prices and high financing costs. That means that more people are in the rental market. With a given supply of rental housing, rents go up. That's what's happened in Brookline, it's what's happened throughout the country. Now, if we were to increase the residential exemption, I would argue that in the short run, rents would probably go down just a little bit, market rent. That's because it would become more attractive to someone who's on the fence to buy a condo rather than rent. Slight reduction in demand for rental housing. But in the long run, the residential exemption is a very, very powerful incentive to condo conversion. That reduces the supply of rental housing, and that drives up rent. It's pretty simple. Thank you.
Harold's point, that's why we often counsel, when people ask us for recommendation, we counsel gradually moving in one direction or another, because it's such a powerful tool, and because it has the doctor system, if it goes up, by or down by a significant amount, we explain in my own personal experience, it's exactly that. I live in Cambridge is a 30% residential. Great, we incentivize us to buy a house, but we bought a house in a building that used to be rental apartments. So we move with the market, but the market also moves create the housing that we all live in, which is the condo as opposed to rent.
Well, so, but in our situation, we can't, there's very little that we can do to increase the small rent, right? It's the large rentals are the ones that I'd like to maybe balance it with that and not impact the small ones, because they're commercial and they're making a lot of money off of the issues that they're.
Yeah.
But Harold, we've heard that 48% of the condos in Brookline are occupied by renters. And that's because once the supply goes down enough, so the rents go up enough, it's attractive to investor owners as well. But if you look at the numbers, but then last year condos were virtually flat. Yeah. And why was that? Because the current financing rate for an investor to buy a condo for rental, you'd have negative cash flow for the first few years. And that's just not very attractive to most investors. So, what's the residential income what percentage of 79%. We're not seeing the same level of investment. But right, but even then, 21% invested on single family, that's a big number to me. There's been a lot of discussion about nationwide about investing in single family homes, and that's anything here with that on here. Okay, as always, Harold, certainly provoking thought here. And one of the things that was mentioned was made earlier, reality, and someone also does a lot of analysis. And one of the things that really shocked me about the information in the email was the wide range of residential exemptions, starting at 0%, and then all the way up to like 35%, I think at the top. Can you just sum up what are the policy implications of going way down to 0, or the policy implications of going way up to 35? Yeah. There are 14 communities in Massachusetts that have a residential exemption. 7 in the greater Boston area and 7 in Cape and the Islands. The Cape and the Islands, they're clearly shifting the burden onto the visitors. And here, Boston, Cambridge, Brookline, has such a large amount of apartment housing. It was fairly easy to shift the burden onto apartments. As opposed to single family or like that. Newton does not have a residential. And in the last 10 years, a number of communities have gone to a means-tested grade, means-tested tax reduction. Starting up in Sudbury and spreading to a few others as an alternative. And how many people are thinking of those things as alternatives? Residential exemption or means-tested exemption. So a better way to do progressivity. And who's to know which was better? Did we get a home rule to do that, or did we have everybody to do it? We did, but we're the only one that made it almost impossible to be eligible. And that's because we decided that people would have to go to the tax deferral first. That was thought to be the best option. If you qualify in terms of the value of your property, and your income, but could not get a tax deferral, you can get the means-tested exemption. But that meant only a few people possibly, whose mortgage had been sold into the secondary market, and they couldn't find a bank to sign off for them to get the tax deferral. So it might possibly have included 1 or 2 or 50 families, who knows how many, but we had no applicants this year.
Just to be clear, this is what was passed by the legislature. So we're now in the second year. The reason we're not talking about it is because, as Harold said, there were no applicants.
Yeah, I remember the discussion about the crazy mechanism that was.
Yeah, the members of the board recall, that was the discussion we had about what the asset limit was back in the spring of last year.
The other thing I recall about that discussion, was that a lot of people were using Sudbury as a model of what Brookline should do, but ignoring the fact that Sudbury doesn't have a residential. That's right, yeah. It's either or for a small number of towns. Yeah. And Brookline and Sudbury is really different, right? It just doesn't make sense to me. We should be looking for that in that direction anyway. I'm not advocating. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. We get it. I'm just saying, Brookline is one. Okay, I've probably said this before here, to the whole members, but Brookline is a place where somebody pointed out to me that it's always been a place where you could rent good schools, you didn't have to buy. It's easy to think about the implications of that when you're trying to set tax policies. You want to make it more possible for people to, in fact, rent good schools, or do you want to pass the burden over to the renters? I came in as a renter. As we said, for 12 years, we were able to buy. But we couldn't do it today. You know, as a young assistant professor, I couldn't do that today. I couldn't do it. It's unfortunate, and it is how we're going to achieve the victory in Brookline is just very, very difficult. But I do caution in that we should be aware that the residential exemption is a powerful incentive to Congress and movement. It reduces the supply of rental housing. I'm trying to work on that empirically so far, not very good myself. I mean, the higher it goes, the more the higher the values, yes. Yeah. Or communities that haven't heard supposed to go. Yeah. I'm trying to look at is what has been the impact on the number of 2 and 3 family homes, and the impact on the number of condos, I'm also trying to look at rent, so the rent is reasonable in communities with residential expenses and a lot. So far, we're almost. But now, isn't the conversion of 2 and 3 family rental housing into, private condominiums, is driven by, the value of the supply of single-family homes or condos is low. And so that's, the developer can get much more value out of the property if they can increase the number of units on that parcel by, generally the new construction. And the value of those condos is so high that if they're doing that, versus rental. There's been some shift, right, where before they would invest and have a long-term rental, and that would be, you have a better return. But, the values of homeownership, the condos are much higher. There's a few things. One is, I think what Hal's talking about is somebody owns a 3-family home, they convert it to condos, two condos, and sell, they freeze it and sell and recoup the cash value of 2/3 of the. But that's not, my sense is that's not what's happening. What's happening is the properties become so valuable. There's some to convert that they're selling. Yeah, there's some of that. They're cashing out, right? Versus trying to redevelop a property on their own. Yeah. I think that's not happening. I think it's the developers are seeing the value. The number of condos has been going up rapidly throughout the state. Yeah, probably the nation, it's not just those with residential expenses. The number of condos has been going up pretty dramatically,
I just have a question, you talked about how you're trying to look at this empirically. Are you looking at all 14 communities?
No, I'm looking at the one, the case of the island, goes down the completely different story. I'm not very interested in them. I'm looking at the 7 in the greater Boston area.
And from just sort of generally eyeballing Brookline versus Newton without an exemption, do you see a difference in terms of the rate that rents are increasing?
I don't recall it. I don't recall it. I think it's very close. The differences are not there. And whether in fact it appears that rent has gone up slightly more in the town with the residential expenses, but it's not statistically significant. So I don't have good evidence for this claim I was trying to do.
Oh, so, excuse me, I shared with some people earlier this week, a little bit of information about what has been happening to, in particular, single-family home tax bills in the last 5 years. And, shared with them, the numbers, I'll just start by them, that 2020, the bills went up 7%, 21, they went up 11%, 22, even on the median, so, it allowed for that, 9%, 23, 4%, 24, 10%. I'd like to be able to, because people ask me this question, what do I think it's going to be in 25? And I'm getting the impression it's going to be the single family homes, something like 7.5.
Yeah, we're the four big offset.
Yeah,
Thinking about this.
yeah. Okay. That might be very interesting to have them come to the next meeting, but on the other hand, I think with a caveat that don't expect us to be able to wave a magic wand and to make that change. I mean, we can shift it around a little bit. But, sort of just not taking our full 2.5%. We really don't have that many options.
One more comment on that. I think one of the things that I struggle with is we don't have a policy. We're not, we're kind of in the minutia, but what is our long-term policy? Is it to, what direction do we want to go in? Are we trying to affect supply of certain types of housing? Are we thinking of moving away from the residential exemption? I don't feel as a board that we have a
compass and direction, that we're going in, and we wrestle with these numbers, and we're in the weeds. And we don't have a strategy that we're long term doing. I don't know what it
And
should
how
be.
would you do it all?
That's the hard part, but the RFP's coming back before we don't even do it. Yeah, I mean, but the other circumstances change, you really have to be looking at it.
I agree with, I don't understand ultimately what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Is it to lower the burden on single family homes?
Yeah.
Is it to
Well, I
reduce
think,
the cost of rents?
I think there's five of us on five different objectives.
Okay, Tiffany, is there anyone else who would like to speak at our hearing?
No one is indicating their desire,
Okay, then the hearing is closed.
or we can,
You can continue.
I'm sorry, yeah, let's adjourn the hearing, continue until, December 3rd. Okay, nothing else on the agenda, or is there? Do we have any warrant articles to review?
Warrant Article 12 is to be a referral motion on warrant Article 12, the year license, some of the language, just needs to be fixed. So I think, John, you're making that motion.
Yeah, because I needed somebody's name to put on.
Yeah.
We don't need
Proud motion.
Yeah.
I know, without even telling you.
I heard that I was seconding, so.
Move by, motion, I thought, that's what we're gonna do.
Rick's on name the second.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Nothing else on the agenda, so I will close the meeting.